We are going to wrap that up and move on to our topic of the week, which is Comets and Cockpits. And that is with Cameron Day. Cameron, obviously, we've already welcomed you to the show, but why don't you, real quick, give us your background and then tell us a little bit about what is a junker space fantasy?
All right. So hello everyone. I got my start in RPGs when I was about 10. Family friend of ours had this like box of 20, 2e, 3.5, 4 stuff just like thrown together. And he was like, here, this is on permanent loan. And then eventually he was just like, yeah, just keep it. And so that's kind of over the years, I would more and more and more. And I used to be like a D&D kid through and through. Now I play a lot of other systems as well. And then in October of 2019, when I was a senior in college, I over that summer I connected with a couple folks on the guild because I'd been reviewing stuff on the guild for a long time, and I was like, why don't I try writing for it? So my first title on the guild, which was October 5th of 2019, was Voices of the Gods, which was a descent into a Avernus themed collection of, it was 4 subclasses, all very, I think I did a Path of the Demigod Barbarian, Archangel Patron Warlock, trying to remember the other ones. Some more beefed up versions of other subclasses that I had, like Celestial Warlock is kind of weak. It's not that exciting. So the Archangel Patron, for instance, the goal was that for warlocks who have lost their previous patrons, excuse me for the idiots going by my house, whatever. But the idea being that if you've lost your patron, the Archangel will come along and become your new patron, no questions asked. But you are bound to that Archangel. Break that promise, it's going to be. And then we took Enochian glyphs and we built a whole Enochian tattoo system in the back of that. We did that. And then the big book that most folks probably know me for is Root and Twig, which I did with my friend Ryan Langer. I did Voices of the Gods with my friend Brian Holmes. Brian and I did Root and Twig, which was a collection of 11 subclasses themed around the American timber industry of the late 1800s and early 1900s. And we had an original class in there called the Garad Rue, which was inspired by Celtic tree divination. So you got this like little symbiotic thing called a Beocrid, which grew with you and grew on you. And based on which type you took, it would give you different abilities. And so I was publishing and writing. And then finally COVID happened. And I was home because I was doing my student teaching and I did my first 8 weeks, which was middle school. Then I had to go home and finish up all of my high school student teaching online. And one day I was farting around because I was on my lunch break. And I'm looking at it, and one of my friends pings me in the DM's Guild Creators server. And they're like, hey, Cam, we need you. And I show up, I'm like, I have been summoned. What do you require? And a couple of buddies of mine have been like throwing around the idea of costume vigilantes in a fantasy setting, like how to make it work. And then we got talking, and then I built a Discord server, and then we did a Kickstarter, all in like 3 months, and that was Supers and Sorcery. So folks will probably know us from there, which was our sort of homage to comic books. And I think one of the fun things is that we kind of went into it with the idea of player characters are already superheroes. You already are above average. So we were like, we're not going to, add tons of extra stuff when you don't really need it. Like, so we added an origin system. We did a bunch of new subclasses, but the really main thing about Supers and Sorcery was the setting, which was the city of Beacon. And the idea being that the 4 levels of Beacon you can tune to the different ages of comic books. So like the low cities like Bronze Age, late 90s, early 2000s, plenty of excess and grit and unrealistic anatomical art. And then you get into like Serenity, and it's more you're like Silver Age, early Bronze Age. You get into Argentum Square, very Silver Age, early Gold Age, and then you get into Paragon's Peak, and it's pure Gold Age. And that was really fun. So then when we were wrapping that up this fall, we were wrapping up, I was like, you know what? Because I'm insane, I just want to do another one now. And I had this idea rolling around in my head because there was this MMO that I loved called WildStar, which I don't think many folks remember. But it was this super weird, quirky, like Borderlands dialed up to 100. It was bright, it was colorful, very zany, and it was this really cool, like, sort of half fantasy, half sci-fi game. Unfortunately, it got shut down in 2019. It was, and that was really inspiring me. I was like, oh, I want to do an RPG like that, and that's how Comets and Cockpits kind of came to be. Was this idea of, you know, when I was talking with Zach Owens, my co-project manager, we were like, there's really a lot of people want Spelljammer, but as far as you know, Spelljammer ain't coming back. That has kind of been left in the annals of history. So then we were like, why don't we build something? I had this idea. I'd gone to Zach to help with the Kickstarter, and we were like, why don't we build this as an alternative to Spelljammer? And really, at the core of Comets and Cockpits is the fact that it's, space fantasy with this junker aesthetic of, like, everything's worn, everything's rusty, there's scrap all over the place. You can build anything you want, that kind of thing. And very much with, like, tastes of stuff from, like, Firefly, Outlaw Star, Cowboy Bebop, Destiny, 40K, just all these different things just sort of smorgasborded into one thing. And we got the team together, and now we got the Kickstarter launched in April. It's been really fun building it and just seeing what has come out of the minds of some of these awesome folks.
I will say, if you ever get a chance to go back and watch any of the WildStar coming soon trailers, by far some of the best marketing, and I'm a big fan of getting hyped up, and it did a wonderful job of that. Just fantastic trailers. I mean, it was just so much potential, but yes.
Nice. I was not familiar with that one at all. Leave it to you, Nolan, to know.
It was good. It was good.
And it was a game that didn't take itself seriously. Like, when you leveled up, there's this guitar riff, and, like, level up would flash across the, and then you just had Fred Tatascar being like, "Oh shit, what a badass!" And it was so stupid, but it was like, it was so good, so good.
So when I think junker space fantasy, I'm going to date myself, and I guarantee, I would wager neither of you know this movie. Have you ever heard of the movie Ice Pirates? Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. So you should go look that up. It's a mid-'80s sci-fi ridiculous movie that really plays into this concept of swashbuckling adventures, wide open exploration, and wild technology that you have in your descriptor of junker space fantasy. And I would say it absolutely classifies itself as this. So you should check it out. It's hilarious. Anyway, sorry, tangent. So tell us about the project. Tell us exactly what you have in here. What exactly are we making? Tell us what exactly you're making.
So when I originally had pitched the idea to Zach, we had kind of thought, this is probably too much for one book, because it's really two settings at the same time. It's going to be two books. So the first book is going to be Geographica Adelphos, which is the setting book based around the planet of Adelphos, which is 39 billion square kilometers. It's the size of Jupiter. And when everyone in the group was like, "But Cam, scientifically that doesn't work," I'm like, they're like, "The gravity." No, no, no. So we've got Adelphos, which is really themed to be much more space western. There's the territory of Haven, which is this tiny, tiny little peninsula on the planet. And there's 6 counties. All the different counties kind of have a different feel, a different taste. And it's really meant to be, there was these ancient civilizations, this great apocalypse happened. None of them are remaining. The ones that did survive escaped into the stars, and their descendants are the people that are now resettling the planet. And so the idea is you can go out and explore and find all these ancient ruins, inside mountains or underneath jungles, and that nature is, like, growing back over them. So you can be a cowboy who rides a dragon and has a rune-powered gun. And it's just really built on that element of goofiness and excitement and that kind of thing. Then with the second book, which is Technologica Epoch, that is set in this giant satellite that orbits the planet, which is actually built from the body of the creator of Adelphos, this being called an exarch, who was named Opus Nin, and they're sort of after they made the planet, they sort of transformed themselves into this space station, which is actually powered by their soul. A little bit of Harlock, Space Pirate. I can't remember the exact name of that movie. And the idea is that that's going to be more of your very hard sci-fi, but with that meant so there's going to be mecha, ships, lots of political espionage, corporate espionage, because on an epoch, the 6 major corporations have a very big presence. So each book is designed to operate separately. But so when you go to back to Kickstarter, you can back and pick, oh, I just want book 1 or I just want book 2, or you can get both. So it's kind of designed so that we're going to fund both at the same time, and folks can pick and choose based on what kind of flavor they would like.
So have you started to map out the Kickstarter? Do you know what like the entry level buy-in is going to be to get one of the books? Have you figured that part out yet?
I would have to pull it up as I don't remember
that's
right off the top of my head. Zach's been handling a lot of that stuff. I've been more, because when we did Supers and Sorcery, my friend Adam Hancock was more of the technical lead, and I was more of the creative lead, as that's more of where my spirit is. Although I think the next couple Kickstarters, I'm going to have to start to learn those skills. So I am taking up those reins. But right now, our goal is going to be $3,000. And that is what we set for Supers and Sorcery. With Supers and Sorcery, we funded in 10 hours. And it's really because 3,000 is like a nice sweet spot. It's not too much and it's not too little. And it worked really well with Supers and Sorcery. We were like 414% funded by the end, and we blew through all of our stretch goals. And so we've got a ton of stretch goals built, but if we blow through those, all the rest of the money is just going to go to art and to the writers. That's really, one of the big things that we ran into was you see these Kickstarters that like raise oodles and oodles of money, and they just keep adding stretch goals, adding stretch goals, adding stretch goals. And they, take months, if not years, to deliver because they're like, oh, we added too much. And then they're kind of stuck. They're like, no, everything we got is just going to go right into the book. But we've kind of alternated so that every other stretch goal, one will go into book 1, one will go into book 2, one will go into book 1, one will go into book 2. So that way, both are equally appreciated. Right now, they are sitting at almost 200 pages of raw text before edits. So we're gonna have some big books.
It's awesome.
That's great. It does look like you have on here that it's going to be published on Drive Through RPG, which makes it so where you're exclusively using the 5e open game license. So that means this will be using the 5e D&D rules.
Yep. We wanted to do that just because it's easier. It's a system everyone knows. And like we said, we want to make it an alternative for folks who might want Spelljammer or who might want Planescape, but also just, rule of cool. I have never been one who has taken balance too seriously. I like folks to have a good time, to just get wild, get crazy at the table. And that's one of the biggest things that went into Comets and Cockpits is, bringing more of that rule of cool kind of fun to it while obviously still using the mechanics. And yeah, and it's just easier to go through drive through rather than to try and build other places, because if you try to do that, then you have to pay a bunch of extra printing fees, and it's a whole schlocky mess for everyone. So drive through is just.
And who doesn't need a massive Drive Through RPG library? Trust me, my bookshelves could not handle my Drive Through RPG library.
Oh, neither could mine. Absolutely not.
And neither could a printer. I think I would burn several printers out trying to print them all. So PDFs are your best friend, especially if you have a tablet.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Well, cool. So what is your timeline? When are you thinking this is actually going to launch?
So we are launching April 15th. So coming right up, we actually just broke 250 followers on the pre-launch page, which is great. And so the goal is we'll launch April 15th, wrap up by mid-May. And then right now we're looking at hopefully launching the books by, our goal is like January 2022. Given just we're going to have a lot of art, we're going to have a lot of layout. I think we can definitely hit that, if not maybe even before then. I think January is like kind of like the proposed, but with Supers and Sorcery, we said we were going to deliver December of 2020, and we delivered December of 2020, like before Christmas. So I think we've got a good attention. But yeah, April 15th is when the Kickstarter will be launching.
That's awesome. And I do, of course, have a link to the Kickstarter pre-launch in the show notes, so people can go and take a look at that. Tell us a little bit more about, like, can you tell us about any special characters or anything like that that are going to be in the campaign?
Yes. Oh, hello. My cat has decided to come and join us.
That's fine. We like cats.
So each book, we tried to equate it out. So as this numpty goes by my house again, each book has 5 original species. And so with each book, we also made sure to include little write-ups on, what the SRD races and species are doing in space. Like, what are they doing here? Like, how did they get here? Because we didn't want, we wanted to offer folks a little bit of groundwork, so that way they don't have to like scramble and try and figure out, what is my elf doing in space. But yeah, we got 5 original species for each book, 10 original spells, 10 original feats. Right now we have, I believe, 7 original subclasses for each book, and then some of our stretch goals are original classes, so we'll get those in. But like, for instance, one of the, and we try to tailor all the races and species and subclasses to really work with each of the books. So like, for instance, one of the sub races I made, or one of the new races I made, are called the Ambaleri, and they're sort of a different type of lizard folk, where they've grown up on this, extremely environmentally hostile planet where all the environment is like dialed up to like 1,000. So they split into these 2 separate groups. The one that's in book 1 are called the Darwick, and they are very much like survivalists. Like, they evolve naturally. They can survive. They're survivalists. Very much inspired by marine iguanas and the Galapagos Islands, if you couldn't tell by the name. And then we have the Aukiak, who are in book 2, and they instead did its scientific experimentation on themselves and installed runes in their bodies to, evolve faster. So again, kind of reflecting, the more survival, more wild feel of book 1, and the more streamlined scientific feeling of book 2. We got a ton of backgrounds too, so we really like backgrounds at daily publications. I think in general, backgrounds are probably one of the most underutilized things characters have access to. Usually when I build a character, I go background first, then class, just because obviously you get skills for free from your background, so you should build like that. But for instance, one of the backgrounds we built for book 1, one that I did, the Cragclaw Wrangler, which is on Adelphos. There are these giant, imagine a lynx the size of a buffalo, called rough-necked cragclaws, and the background is called the Cragclaw Wrangler, and you get a cragclaw as a mount. One of the stretch goals is I want to build a whole new system for mounted combat, training mounts, that kind of thing. And there's a whole thing of like how you connect it to the mount. What is the personality of your Cragclaw? And it's very much built in like that Western feel of like, in cowboy movies, you have the cowboy, but you have the horse. The horse is also kind of a secondary. Or then jump to book 2, and one of the backgrounds I made for book 2 was an office jockey, running around one of the different corporations. So depending on which corporation you pick, you'll have a contact there, and maybe you'll get different skills based on which corporation you work for. I didn't do any feats for book 1, but I did I did do a feat for book 2 based off of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure stands. It is stupid. It is so ridiculous. It's called Stand and Deliver. It's an absolute spoof feat, but it's great. It's super fun. And then sort of the big things I think that set both books apart is with book 1, this awesome writer, Kai Linder, he worked with some other folks, Lydia Van Hoy on our team, to create this whole new runic system of runic magic. So in our universe, there's Spark, and magic is derived from Spark. So we didn't reinvent the magic system. We're just adding to it. So one of the things you can do is you can find rune stones, or you can find sigils, which when combined create rune stones. And so by doing that, if you have a fire sigil and like a I don't know, like a power sigil, and you combine them, you make a fire power runestone, which can be used as like a battery. So we really wanted to build that. And then with book 2, we have the whole way of building mecha based on which chassis you take, what kind of weapons you build, which corporation you get parts from. And I think those are some of the big things that really set the tone of them differently, but also make them connected as well. Because if you want, you could get book 2 and bring your mecha to Adelphos, and then try to have your mecha like make it through the jungles of Adelphos or something. But those are some of the things that players can have to look forward to.
That's awesome.
So Nolan's a loot guy. Nolan always wants to know what the loot is, right? He's like the guy who goes into a dungeon. He's like, okay, we killed him, but what did we get?
What are they carrying? They had nothing on them. That's bullshit. I got shit in my pocket right now, and I'm not even a boss, man. Like, let's go.
So, is there any cool loot that Nolan would be excited about?
Yes. So we have a bunch of new armor types. I would definitely say book 1 is more loot heavy. Just because it's much more that like space western exploration grungy feel. There's more stuff you can find. It's got a bunch of new armors, a bunch of new weapons. The magic items are really sweet. A buddy of mine, Noah Simpson, who worked on the project with us, he and I are both very big Bionicle fans, and we found some excellent ways to get some Bionicle Easter eggs into both of the books. So one of the things he made, which if anyone watching ever got the 2008, it was like 2008, 2007, Baraki and Toamari lines where they're underwater, the bad guys have squid launchers. And so we made a squid gun, or Noah made a squid gun that fires live squids, but the minute the squids land, they are independent and they do not do what you want them to do. It's just a free, and he specifically says that in the rules of they could act completely independent of what you want them to do. So we got that. Another cool little item I built is called the Cone Slinger. So one of the territories is called Tide Timber, and it's very much like huge redwoods, big coastal forests, and it's a shotgun that fires slugs made out of pine cones. So it's like compressed flammable pine cones that you can fire. One of the magic items you can find, a little teaser, is we have these critters called Crocodragons, which are draconic crocodiles that live in the salt marshes around the coast. And there's a magic item, which is a set of Crocodragon armor that you get and find, which is pretty exciting. Some of the stuff, a lot more of the stuff for like book 2, a lot of the loot in book 2 is we have a lot of cool concealed weapons. We obviously have a huge firearms table. We've added a ton of firearms. Oliver King, they worked on adding a ton of new weapons. So you can get that, but also just like cool gear to have around a space station. So lots of like repair weapons. A lot of the weapons we added, there's some cool non-lethal options. So again, another Bionicle inspired one. Zammer Sphere, or we call it the Fear Sphere Launcher. So if you fire it, it shoots out a globe that hits a target or a couple of targets and induces them with the command spell, and you tell them like specifically to flee or run. So there's lots of goodies that you will be able to get.
Good, because no one would be upset if there wasn't.
Yep. It sounds really cool. I recently finished up a playthrough of The Outer World, and it was kind of one of those thoughts in my mind was like, this would be a fun story to play in D&D, and so it's cool to see some of that stuff there. WildStar was a great game, and kind of the same thoughts of, not take yourself too seriously, but also, again, a lot of things to hit on there. I think you kind of hit a little bit of everybody, seeing the mech guy next to the horse guy, and both of them care equally about their counterpart. I mean, just as much as they would, a living person. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for role play in that as well. It sounds really cool.
Because one of the things we ran into is like, how do we make your fantasy characters still matter just as much as a sci-fi character? Like, why do you still want to play as a half-orc druid when you could easily play as one of these other characters that is more themed to the setting? When the idea is that again, we didn't take anything away. Your character if you wanted to be more fantastical, is still just as, appreciated and still just as valid in this setting, if not more so, because you can tailor them to either thing. So, like one of the things we did, I'll just use kind of with book 2 when we were talking about the races and how the SRD races work. The world is with elves. You're thinking elves, for example, like, okay, how would elves react to a technologically advanced future? And we were like, well, elves often are kind of isolationist assholes. They don't really care about the rest of the world, so they just stay in their fortresses and they don't care. But what happens when they look outside and they're like, oh shit, everyone has space travel and we don't because we've been stuck here not doing anything. So we've built it so that in lore, elves are like really bad with tech. They like don't understand how it works. They struggle with it. It acts up around them. So instead of having ships, they just build these huge portals because like we don't know how to build ships. We don't want to build ships. So that's kind of like one. And then with half elves, we did this cool thing in Epoch where um, half elves, because they kind of ride that line of human but also elven, they have a unique ability to interface with technology. But the longer they interface it, when the more they interface with it, they start to become more biomechanical as that integration begins to affect their body. All the races have, all the SRD races have new, racial abilities that either replace old ones or add new ones to make them work in the universe. And all the subclasses are themed to still be able to work in the universe. Like for warlocks in book 1, we have a kaiju patron because there are kaiju that you can fight that live on the planet. So it still works. Or, for book 2, one of the ones I designed was the Epoch Commando for Rogue. So you still are a rogue, but you're more like a SWAT officer or SWAT fighter who works on the space station to keep things going. So it's all, everything was added. Nothing was removed or reduced. Everything is still very valid. Have a more fantastical theme.
I'm a big fan of like the Mass Effect series, and so when you talk about all that stuff, I'm like, well, I'm just gonna make a human battle master and watch me be like an N7 agent. Like you can still find a way to make that kind of stuff of work of just being good with a melee weapon or a longbow transfers pretty well from, well, it's a rifle now, and let's get a little bit closer or whatever. So I think it works. I mean, I think people have a blast with it.
Okay, one of the things I enjoy doing on this show, especially with people who come on here with their projects, is giving you 15 seconds to give me the elevator pitch. Tell me why I should be backing Comets and Cockpits that launches on, you said April 15th?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, you have 15 seconds. Go.
All right. Do you want to be homesteaders crash landing on a forgotten mega planet, or tech magnates exploring an ancient lost satellite? Do all these and more, explore the wild side of science fantasy.
Comets and Cockpits launches April 15th on Kickstarter. There is a link to the Kickstarter pre-launch in the show notes. Cam, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It was a good time.
Absolutely. Nolan, that is our time for this week. Do you have anything else before we go?
No, as it gets closer, keep us in the loop, and anything you can sneak us that you want out there to try and hype it up. We're happy to do a review on it, talk about it, give our 10-mile opinion of it as well. So good luck to you on this. This looks great. I'm sure it's going to do fantastic because, I mean, why wouldn't you want a mech on my halfling? I mean, how else am I going to get around faster?
One of the big things I will say is just if folks come and follow me on Twitter, it's at DaylightPub1066. Every 10 more followers we get, now that we've broken 250, every 50 more followers we get to add $50 more to the pre-Kickstarter budget for art. But every 10 more followers, we do a reveal, little sneak peek of subclass, of a subrace, of we just revealed one of our mounts today, the Fen Flitters. So if you imagine like a water strider the size of a horse that you can ride. So every 10 followers, we do a little sneak peek. Just follow me, you'll be able to see that.
What
Awesome.
was that Twitter handle again?
At Daylight Pub 1066. 1066, the Battle of Hastings. I'm a history nerd.
All right, we have that in the show notes. Well, that is going to be our show for this week. Nolan, it is always a pleasure to see you. I don't see you enough anymore. We're going to have to get together for drinks soon. Cameron, thank you so much for coming on the show. Folks, thank you so much for listening. We will catch you next week.
Bye.